On Christmas Eve, as snow blanketed the world and every home glowed with warmth, a black man stepped outside and found a little girl digging through his trash in the freezing dark. No one knew where she came from, and no one could have predicted how that single moment would shake the course of his life. What makes a grieving man open his door to a stranger on the coldest night of the year? If you're watching this video on a quiet evening somewhere out there in the world, tell me, where are you watching from, and are you ready to believe in a miracle? Heavy snow drifted slowly beyond the frosted window panes, blanketing the front yard in a soft, uninterrupted white. Inside Kelsey Harold, a tall black man with heavy-set shoulders and a face weathered by recent grief, stood silently by the thermostat. He adjusted the dial, more out of habit than necessity. His eyes flicked up to the wall clock. It was Christmas Eve, 7:42 p.m. Under different circumstances, the grand house would have been alive by now, with music playing, oven doors opening and shutting, the scent of sugar cookies filling the rooms, and laughter echoing through the vaulted ceilings. But not this year, not this Christmas. The silence was so deep it seemed to press against the ornate moldings and long polished corridors, swallowing any attempt at comfort. Twinkling lights on the tall Christmas tree pulsed gently in the dim room, casting soft, multicolored reflections onto the walls. The ornaments gleamed in red and gold. The wrapped gifts beneath the tree remained untouched, their bows still perfectly fluffed. Kelsey had spent hours decorating stringing lights, hanging stockings, placing every ornament with care. He had done it for tradition's sake, but traditions felt hollow now. His eyes settled on Lucy, his 5-year-old daughter, seated quietly on the plush rug in the living room. Her black hair was braided loosely to the side, a style Kelsey had tried his best to master, but never quite got right. She clutched a worn cloth doll dressed in a faded blue dress, staring intently at the tree lights without blinking. That doll, Kelsey swallowed. Hillary had made it as a child, sewing it by hand to fight off her own childhood nightmares. She used to laugh when she told the story. Now the doll was all Lucy had left of her mother. "Sweetheart," Kelsey asked softly, doing his best to sound cheerful, "would you like some hot chocolate?" Lucy didn't look up. She gave the smallest shake of her head. Her eyes, once so lively, looked vacant hollow, like two windows into a place far beyond the room. Kelsey recognized that look. It was the same expression he saw in the mirror every morning since Hillary's passing. He walked into the kitchen. His footsteps echoed too loudly on the hardwood floors. Opening the fridge out of routine more than hunger, he stared blankly inside. On the counter, Hillary's old recipe book still lay open. She had planned a full Christmas dinner this year. This year, it had only been 3 months. 3 months since that phone call from the hospital had upended everything. There was an accident. We did everything we could. We're so sorry. Those words still woke him in the middle of the night, soaked in sweat, gasping for air. Still, he made the hot chocolate. It was the least he could do. He returned to the living room and placed the steaming mug on the coffee table, just within reach, in case Lucy changed her mind. "Santa's probably getting ready now," he said gently, trying to spark a conversation. "You wrote him a letter, remember?" Lucy finally looked up. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Mommy's not coming back, is she?" The question hit Kelsey like a punch to the gut. They'd spoken about this before, carefully, cautiously. But the word forever was too abstract for a 5-year-old. "No baby," he said, his voice heavy as he sat beside her on the rug. "She's not coming back, but she's always watching over us, from a special place, like heaven." "Like heaven," Lucy repeated, tightening her hold on the doll, as if Hillary might see her in that very moment. "So she can see Santa too?" Kelsey nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. "I bet she can. I think she'd like that." Lucy was quiet again, taking it all in. Then she said so softly he almost missed it, "I asked her to come back in my letter." Kelsey closed his eyes. "How do you tell a child that not even Santa can fix some things, Lucy?" he began, but there were no words that would do, no words that would comfort. "It's okay," she said before he could continue. "My teacher says sometimes we ask for things that can't happen." He looked at his daughter, so small yet carrying such heavy truths. He gently wrapped his arm around her, and the two sat there in silence, watching the lights shimmer on the tree. Outside, the wind picked up, swirling the snow into soft spirals against the dark sky. Kelsey thought of Hillary and how much she loved snow. Last year, they had built 3 snowmen in the front yard, one for each of them. Afterwards, they came inside drinking cocoa, just like the one now cooling untouched on the coffee table. "Want to open one present tonight?" he offered, remembering their old tradition. "Your mom always let you open one on Christmas Eve." Lucy considered it for a moment, then shook her head. "Tomorrow." Kelsey nodded, respecting her choice. Something in her voice made him pause. It carried a fragile kind of hope, like if she waited until morning, maybe her impossible wish would somehow come true. The clock chimed 8:30. Normally, Lucy would have been tucked in by now. "It's getting late, Princess. Time for bed." "Can I stay up a little longer?" she asked. It was the first time in weeks she had wanted something. He smiled gently. 10 more minutes, he agreed, grateful for this small, quiet return of the Lucy he used to know. Upstairs, Lucy's room waited quiet and still. The shelves were lined neatly with stuffed animals carefully arranged by Kelsey, in the same way Hillary always had. He had tried to keep everything as she left it, the pink curtains gently swaying with the furnace's soft breath, the soft comforter pulled tight, the night lamp shaped like a moon resting on the bedside table. Come morning, filtered sunlight would pour through the curtains, casting a soft glow across the room. Christmas morning, there would be gifts under the tree, and he planned a special breakfast. Pancakes, bacon, the cinnamon rolls Hillary used to make. He would do everything right. But no matter how perfectly he performed the motions, the absence she left behind could not be filled. Downstairs, Kelsey stood by the window, his gaze unfocused as he watched snow continue to fall steady and silent. Some neighbors had turned off their lights for the night, while others kept their Christmas decorations glowing in the dark. The warm bulbs cast flickers onto the snow-dusted roofs and sidewalks. "Daddy." Lucy's voice reached him soft and hesitant. "Yes, sweetheart." "Do you think Mommy likes our tree?" He turned toward the living room. The tree stood tall, glowing with warm white lights draped in red and gold ornaments. The star at the top leaned slightly to one side. Kelsey had done his best to decorate it just as Hillary used to. He swallowed gently before answering. "I think so, baby. I think she'd love it." Lucy gave a small, satisfied nod and returned to watching the lights. Kelsey stood still watching her. In that moment, a silent promise took shape inside him. Somehow, he would bring joy back to her eyes. He didn't yet know how, but he believed there had to be a way. After all, Christmas was a time for miracles, even if they felt impossible. Later that night, after tucking Lucy into bed, Kelsey found sleep elusive. His mind wouldn't quiet, chasing memories and questions into the dark. It wasn't until well past 3 in the morning that his eyes finally closed. And only a few hours later, it was the absence of sound that stirred him. Silence, that strange, unsettling kind, greeted him as he opened his eyes. No sound of tiny feet rushing to the tree. No high-pitched shouts of "Santa came." He looked over at the clock, 7:13 a.m. Christmas morning. He slipped into his robe, tugged it over his pajamas, and padded softly across the hall. Peeking into Lucy's room, he found her still asleep, clutching her mother's handmade doll tightly to her chest. He chose not to wake her. Downstairs, the kitchen felt cold, despite the warm air. Kelsey started the coffee maker, the hum and gurgle of familiar comfort. As he waited, he glanced out the window. The yard had transformed overnight. A thick blanket of snow now covered everything untouched and pristine. Then movement near the edge of the garage caught his eye. He squinted, leaning closer to the frosted pane. At first, he assumed it was an animal, perhaps a raccoon rooting through the trash. But the shape wasn't right. Too upright, too small. It was a child. Kelsey's chest tightened. A child outside in the snow, rifling through garbage on Christmas morning. Instinct overtook hesitation. He grabbed his boots, pulled on his coat, and stepped into the bitter cold. The air bit at his face and throat. Snow crunched beneath his feet as he made his way toward the bins. As he got closer, the scene became painfully clear. A young girl no older than Lucy was crouched by the trash. She wore a coat far too large for her sleeves rolled up many times. Her brown hair was tangled, her cheeks reddened and raw from the cold. She was so focused on the object in her hands, a worn round button, that she hadn't noticed him approach. "Hi there," Kelsey said gently, keeping his tone low and soft. She startled, jerking back, clutching the button protectively, her eyes wide dark and filled with fear, locked onto him like a cornered animal. She said nothing, only stared. "It's okay," he assured her, keeping a careful distance. "I won't hurt you. It's cold out here. Would you like to come inside, warm up a bit?" Still, she didn't speak. Her expression remained wary. Her eyes held more fatigue than any child should. She had seen too much. Kelsey could feel it. "My name's Kelsey," he offered, crouching slightly to meet her eye level. "I live in that house." He pointed behind him. "My daughter's inside, Lucy. She's 5. How old are you?" The girl hesitated. Then slowly she raised a tiny, dirt-smudged hand and spread 5 fingers. 5, just like Lucy, Kelsey said, nodding. "Are you hungry?" Another cautious nod, smaller this time. She was shivering despite the oversized coat. Her shoes were soaked and she wore no gloves. He could see the signs now, grime layered along the sleeves, dirt crusted in her nails. This wasn't a one-night misadventure. She had been on her own for a while. "Where are your parents?" She looked down immediately and said nothing. Kelsey didn't press. He had hit a nerve. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Snowflakes fell around them, settling on the girl's shoulders. He saw her lips begin to tremble, not from cold, but uncertainty. He needed to move gently. He took a slow breath and lowered himself just a little more, making sure not to crowd her. There was something inside him, something deeper than holiday spirit or sympathy. A pull, quiet and firm, as if this moment this child had appeared in his life for a reason. "Would you like to spend Christmas with us just today?" he said, almost surprised at the words as they left his mouth. She didn't answer, but her eyes flickered, a spark of something doubt mixed with longing. "We have food," he added softly, "and it's warm inside." She looked at the house, then back at him, her expression still guarded, but her feet shifted, slowly. Then a tentative step forward. "What's your name?" Her voice was barely audible. "Helena," she said. Kelsey smiled. "That's a beautiful name." He reached out his hand. After a moment's hesitation, she placed her cold, small fingers into his. He didn't squeeze, just held them lightly. Fragile trust, not to be broken. Side by side, they walked toward the house, snow crunching beneath their feet, 2 silhouettes against the white. A new story was about to begin. Helena stood quietly clutching the small button in her hand, as if it were a priceless heirloom. The weight of her unspoken story hung in the warm air. Kelsey could feel it. This wasn't just a cold morning or a charitable gesture. This child carried with her a world far heavier than her tiny frame should bear. "Thank you," she said suddenly, her voice so soft it almost blended with the hiss of the radiator, "for letting me in." Kelsey paused, surprised by her gratitude. "You don't have to thank me," he said, feeling his throat tighten. The fact that she felt the need to express gratitude for something as basic as warmth and safety tugged at something deep inside him. "I'll get you something warm. You must be hungry." Helena nodded, a flicker of hope appearing in her eyes at the mention of food. Kelsey led her into the kitchen. The warmth from the stove was gentle but welcome. He began preparing hot chocolate, placing a few cookies on a small plate. From the doorway, a sleepy voice broke the quiet. "Daddy." Lucy stood there, rubbing her eyes with the back of her hand. She was still in her pajamas, her mother's doll clutched tightly to her chest. Her gaze landed on Helena, confusion and curiosity flickering across her face. "Good morning, Princess," Kelsey said, doing his best to sound casual. "Merry Christmas. This is Helena. She'll be staying with us today." Lucy looked at Helena with wide eyes, intrigued. Helena, in contrast, seemed to shrink slightly, as if she wished she could disappear into the floor. Kelsey poured the hot chocolate and set the mugs on the tray with the cookies. He carried everything into the living room. The Christmas tree still glowed softly, the wrapped gifts sitting untouched beneath it. "Let's sit here," he suggested, motioning to the plush rug near the fireplace. "It's warmer." They sat together in silence. Helena's hands wrapped tightly around the mug, as if afraid it might be taken away. The warmth and sweetness slowly began to soften her guarded posture. Her shoulders relaxed slightly. Occasionally she would glance sideways at Lucy and her doll with timid curiosity. After several quiet moments, Helena spoke. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I used to live on the street with my mom," she said, eyes fixed on the hot chocolate. "But she got sick. She didn't wake up." Kelsey felt the air catch in his chest. There was nothing dramatic in her words, no tears or trembling, just the raw truth of a child who had witnessed too much. Lucy stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly she hugged her doll tighter and said softly, "I lost my mom too. I miss her a lot." The two girls looked at each other, something unspoken passing between them, a shared understanding, a pain they both knew but could not explain. Kelsey sat back slightly, watching, sensing that this was something delicate, something he shouldn't interrupt. Children in their quiet wisdom could recognize sorrow in one another without shame or awkwardness. There was no judgment, no pity, only recognition. Outside, snow continued to fall in a soft, steady hush. It blanketed the yard and trees, muting the world in white. Inside the house, something tender and uncertain was beginning to grow a connection, a fragile start, perhaps even the first glimpse of a new kind of family. It was, after all, Christmas. And maybe, just maybe, miracles still had room to breathe. The girls remained quiet, processing the weight of what had just passed between them. Their mugs sat cooling in their hands as they sat shoulder to shoulder, bonded now by a mutual loss that transcended circumstance. Kelsey rose gently and stepped away to the kitchen, giving them the space they needed. He glanced back over his shoulder, watching them from the doorway. In that small, silent tableau, he could feel the beginning of something meaningful, delicate, like the first sprout pushing through frozen earth. Through the kitchen window, he watched the snow. It had covered every inch of the yard, now softening the outlines of bushes and trees. In the distance, he saw a few neighborhood children dragging shiny new sleds bundled in scarves and coats. Their laughter was muffled through the glass. Kelsey stood there thinking about how quickly life could shift. That very morning, he'd woken with a weight in his chest, haunted by Hillary's absence, wondering how he'd ever coax a smile from Lucy again. Now, in this same house, another child sat beside his daughter, and for the first time in months, Lucy wasn't alone. He slid another batch of cookies into the oven and returned to the living room. The girls were still on the rug. Helena remained curled up, her small hand still wrapped protectively around the button she had found, while Lucy cradled her doll in her lap. Neither of them spoke, but from time to time each would sneak a glance at the other, believing themselves unseen. The lights from the tree shimmered gently, reflecting off the fireplace flames and casting golden specks on the walls. The wrapped gifts remained untouched. Kelsey considered suggesting they open one, but something told him it wasn't time. Then, after a long pause, Lucy drew in a deep breath. Her small shoulders rose and fell with the weight of it. She bit her lower lip, a habit she had picked up from Hillary when anxious before speaking. "Do you want to play with me?" she asked. Her voice was timid but earnest, and Kelsey's heart caught in his throat. He hadn't heard her extend such an invitation in months. Since the funeral, Lucy had withdrawn, rejecting even the most well-meaning classmates. She had surrounded herself with silence with her doll, and with memories too heavy for a child to carry alone. Helena looked up surprised, as if she hadn't expected to be included. Her dark eyes widened, and she shook her head slightly, not as a refusal, but as if to say, "I'm not sure I remember how." Lucy seemed to understand without needing more words. Slowly, she stood and crossed the room to a low shelf where her toys were kept. Kelsey watched in quiet anticipation as she carefully considered her options. Her small fingers moved gently over a row of stuffed animals, then paused at a stack of brightly colored books before finally settling on a particular doll, a blonde-haired figure in a pink dress. This wasn't just any doll. It was Star Princess, one of Lucy's most beloved treasures, a birthday gift from not long ago. She rarely let anyone touch it, not even her closest friends at school. Kelsey held his breath. He knew what this meant. Lucy turned and walked back toward Helena. She extended the doll with both hands, her voice solemn and sincere. "You can play with her. I'm letting you." Helena looked from the doll to Lucy with disbelief. Her eyes scanned the shimmering pink dress, the tiny glittering shoes, the perfectly brushed hair. Slowly, hesitantly, as if the offer might vanish if she moved too fast, she reached out. Her small fingers, still marked by dirt, hovered above the doll's pristine fabric. She pulled back. "It's okay," Lucy said, nudging the doll a little closer. "She doesn't mind, and we can wash our hands after." At last, Helena took the doll, holding it with a care so delicate it was as if she thought it might shatter in her hands. Her eyes widened as she felt its weight, solid, new, untouched by the harshness of the outside world. Something about it seemed almost unreal. "Does she have a name?" Helena asked, her voice nearly a whisper. "Star Princess," Lucy replied, pronouncing the name with a childlike reverence. "Because she has little stars on her dress. Look." She pointed to the embroidered sparkles on the doll's gown. Helena traced one of them with a fingertip, her expression filled with wonder. "Are they real?" she asked, marveling at the shimmer. "Don't be silly." Lucy giggled softly. "They're pretend, but we pretend they're real." Helena nodded, absorbing the logic, as if learning something very important. And maybe she was. Kelsey thought of all the basic experiences this little girl had likely missed while living on the streets, simple lessons in play and imagination. Lucy sat down next to her, closing the distance between them. She picked up the worn cloth doll left to her by Hillary and began to demonstrate how the two dolls could play together. "This is Lily," she explained, holding up the faded toy. "She's Star Princess's best friend. They go on lots of adventures." Helena listened intently, her eyes darting from one doll to the other as if trying to understand the relationship between them. "I'll show you how to brush her hair," Lucy offered, pulling a tiny pink plastic comb from the pocket of her pajamas. It was decorated with little flowers. "You have to go really slow so it doesn't hurt." She began demonstrating with careful practice strokes, moving the comb through the synthetic hair in gentle motions. Her hands worked with confidence, the result of repetition and care. "It's like taking care of a baby," she added. "You have to be patient." Helena watched every movement, her eyes focused and eager. After a moment, Lucy handed her the comb. "Do you want to try?" Helena accepted the comb, her hand slightly trembling. She began to mimic Lucy's movements, slowly passing the comb through the doll's hair. It caught on a small knot, and she froze, looking at Lucy with a mixture of panic and guilt. "It's okay," Lucy reassured her. "Her hair gets tangled sometimes. We just have to be gentle like this." She showed her how to ease the knot without pulling. Helena tried again, this time with more confidence. "You're doing great," Lucy said with genuine praise. Helena smiled, a brief, flickering smile, but real. It was the first time Kelsey had seen her smile, and it transformed her. Her eyes lit up, and the worry that seemed etched into her small face softened, even if just for a moment. The two girls began to play together. Slowly, at first, still a little shy, but clearly interested in each other. Lucy explained the unspoken rules of her doll world, and Helena listened, as if absorbing a secret language. "Star Princess lives in a giant castle," Lucy narrated, building a world with her words. "It has gardens and fountains and lots of horses. But sometimes she gets tired of being a princess and goes into the forest with Lily." "Are there monsters in the forest?" Helena asked, eyes wide. Lucy paused. "Sometimes. But Star Princess isn't scared. She has magic powers." "What kind of powers?" "She can make trees grow and talk to animals," Lucy said with authority. "And when she gets really scared, she can turn invisible." Helena considered that, clearly impressed. "I wish I could turn invisible," she said softly. From the kitchen doorway, Kelsey felt a pang. How many times had this little girl wished she could vanish to escape fear or danger? The thought hurt more than he expected, but Lucy didn't ask questions. She simply nodded. "When we play, you can be invisible," she said. "We just pretend." Helena seemed satisfied with that. They continued their game, creating a story where the dolls explored enchanted forests and met magical creatures. Their world expanded to include underwater kingdoms, friendly dragons, and fairies trapped in spiderwebs. Kelsey watched as Lucy shared her toys, explained her ideas, and welcomed someone into her private world for the first time in months. It had been so long since he'd seen her engage this way, not since Hillary passed. Lucy had withdrawn, isolating herself from even the kindest classmates. But now she was building a bridge, reaching out to someone who, like her, had carried a loss too big for such small shoulders. The scent of fresh-baked cookies filled the house. Kelsey returned to the kitchen to remove them from the oven. As he set them out to cool, he could hear bits of conversation from the living room about castles, forests, and magical adventures. The girls' voices, once hesitant, now carried more energy, and every now and then he heard a small giggle, fleeting but unmistakable. It was the first time in 3 months that he'd heard Lucy laugh. As daylight faded, the last golden rays of the winter sun slipped behind the trees, surrendering the sky to the deepening hues of dusk. A muted indigo crept in through the windows, casting long shadows on the walls. Kelsey realized how quickly the day had passed. Christmas was nearly over, and they hadn't opened a single gift or followed any of the traditions he had painstakingly planned. Yet to his surprise, none of that seemed important anymore. He glanced at the clock just before 6 in the evening. It was time to start thinking about dinner. He had prepared a small turkey the day before, along with a few side dishes, expecting it to be just him and Lucy. Now there would be one more seat at the table. The thought made him smile, not out of obligation, but something warmer, deeper. He returned to the living room where the girls were still engrossed in their imaginary world. The dolls, now embroiled in a complex rescue mission to save a prince trapped in a tower, were at the center of their focus. "Girls," he said gently, not wanting to startle them, "would you like to have dinner with me?" Both turned to him, momentarily startled, as if remembering his presence for the first time in hours. Lucy nodded eagerly and stood up. Helena, on the other hand, looked unsure, her gaze drifting to the doll in her hands as if uncertain what to do next. "You can bring her with you," Lucy offered, noticing Helena's hesitation. "She can have dinner with us. Lily is coming too." Helena smiled again, still small, but more confident than before. Kelsey felt a swell of gratitude for his daughter's sensitivity, her innate understanding of what Helena needed without needing to be told. In the kitchen, Kelsey had set the table with the good china white porcelain with delicate gold rims usually reserved for special occasions. He lit 2 taper candles at the center of the table, their soft glow flickering against the crystal glasses and silverware. The turkey sat proudly on a large platter, surrounded by roasted potatoes, corn gravy, and other traditional Christmas sides. It was a modest feast, but the warmth it brought filled the room. "Let's wash our hands before we eat," he said, leading the girls to the sink. He helped them reach the faucet, his hands steady as he guided theirs under the stream of warm water. Helena stared at the running water with quiet wonder, as if it were something new to her. Kelsey found himself wondering just how long it had been since she'd had access to clean water and soap. Once clean, he fetched 2 extra chairs, one for each doll, and placed them carefully between Lucy and Helena. The girls gently set their dolls in the chairs, positioning them just so. "Do the dolls eat too?" Kelsey asked, joining their game. "Not really," Lucy explained patiently. "We just pretend they do." Kelsey nodded as if this were valuable wisdom. He served the girls, offering generous portions to Helena, who looked at the food with wide eyes. "Go ahead, sweetheart," he encouraged, noticing her hesitation. She seemed to be waiting for permission. When she finally picked up her fork, it was with awkward, unpracticed movements, as if the utensils themselves were unfamiliar. She glanced at Lucy, then mirrored her actions. When she brought a piece of turkey to her mouth and took a bite, she closed her eyes for a moment as if savoring something rare. "Is it good?" Kelsey asked gently. Helena nodded quickly, her mouth still full. After swallowing, she added in a small voice, "I've never had anything this good before." Kelsey felt his chest tighten. He wanted to ask about her life, about her mother, about how long she'd been on her own. But he knew it wasn't the time. Helena was only just beginning to relax, to trust. Pushing too hard could undo everything. As they ate, Kelsey noticed how Helena's eyes scanned every detail, the neatly folded napkins, the delicate stemware, the glow of the candlelight. She looked around as if she were in a museum, unsure if she was allowed to touch anything. Everything seemed fragile, sacred. Lucy chatted about past Christmases, about presents she had received, snowmen they had built in the yard, the way her mother used to make peppermint cocoa. Helena listened with rapt attention, her eyes lighting up as she imagined this world so different from her own. Then, as the conversation lulled, Helena spoke. Her voice was low, trembling slightly. "Sometimes I sleep in boxes to stay out of the wind." The sentence fell into the room like a stone in still water. Lucy stopped mid-sentence and stared at Helena, her eyes suddenly glistening with tears as the weight of that truth hit her. Kelsey felt a sharp ache in his throat. He pictured the small child curled up in a cardboard box trying to stay warm in the biting cold. The image was unbearable. "And where did you sleep last night?" he asked softly. Helena looked away, embarrassed. "Behind the market, in the alley. There were some big boxes there." The simplicity with which she said it only made it harder to bear. No child should ever have to say such a thing. Kelsey didn't press further. He didn't offer empty reassurances. He just nodded, holding the silence, gently letting her know she had been heard. That Christmas dinner around the candlelit table, something fragile and precious unfolded. They hadn't followed the schedule Kelsey had planned. The presents still sat unopened under the tree. But in that quiet exchange, through food, shared stories, and unspoken understanding, they had formed something real. A moment of connection, a flicker of healing, and maybe the first true breath of a new beginning. Kelsey took a deep breath, trying to steady the flood of emotion rising in his chest. His mind swirled with what he was supposed to do. Technically, the right thing was to call social services. That was the proper protocol. But it was Christmas. No one would be available until after the holidays, and the thought of sending Helena back into the cold night was simply unthinkable. "It's freezing outside tonight," he finally said, his voice calm and measured. "If you'd like, you can stay here just for tonight." Helena's face lit up with hope, though she quickly tried to hide it as if afraid she might seem too eager and have the offer rescinded. "I can," she asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. "Of course," Kelsey confirmed with a nod. "We've got a guest room you can use." "She can stay in my room," Lucy chimed in enthusiastically. "My bed's really big." Kelsey smiled at his daughter's generous spirit, but gently shook his head. "I think it's better if Helena has a space to herself tonight. She could probably use the rest." After dinner, as Lucy eagerly helped clear the table, a chore she usually tried to avoid, Kelsey prepared the guest room. He changed the bed linens, found a set of Lucy's old pajamas that might fit Helena, and laid out a fresh towel for her to use. When he returned to the living room, he found the girls still playing. Lucy was giving Helena a tour of her toys, showing her each one with the pride of a museum curator. Helena's eyes were wide with admiration. They had created a little puppet theater from couch cushions with dolls lined up like an audience. "Helena, would you like a warm bath before bed?" Kelsey offered. "I've set out some clean clothes I think will fit you." Helena nodded shyly and followed him to the bathroom. He showed her how to adjust the water temperature where the soap and towels were and assured her that he would be right outside if she needed anything. Then he closed the door, giving her privacy, sensing that this gesture might mean more than she could ever express. While waiting, Kelsey and Lucy sat in the hallway. "Is she going to live with us?" Lucy asked suddenly, her voice candid and curious. Kelsey blinked, caught off guard. "I don't know yet, sweetheart," he replied honestly. "For now, she'll stay just for the night, and then we'll figure out what's best for her." Lucy nodded slowly, absorbing the answer. "I like her," she said simply. Kelsey smiled and wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "I do too." 15 minutes later, Helena stepped out of the bathroom, looking almost like a different child. Her hair was freshly washed, still damp, and clinging to her cheeks. Her skin, flushed from the warm steam, glowed with a healthy pink, and she wore the unicorn-patterned pajamas that once belonged to Lucy. She looked younger, more vulnerable, and more importantly, like the little girl she truly was. Kelsey guided her into the guest room he had prepared. He had hung soft fairy lights around the window, casting a gentle glow that made the room feel both cozy and magical. Helena stepped in slowly, taking in every detail: the crisp white sheets, the nightstand lamp casting a soft pool of light, the thick curtains keeping out the cold. Her eyes scanned the room in quiet awe. "This will be your room tonight," Kelsey said, adjusting the thermostat. "If you need anything, my room's down the hall, and Lucy's is right next door." Helena nodded silently, still soaking in the wonder of it all. Lucy appeared at the doorway now, in her own pajamas and holding her cloth doll. "Do you want me to tell you a story before you sleep?" she offered kindly. "Dad always tells me one." Kelsey's heart swelled at the sight. "Maybe I can tell one to both of you," he suggested. The girls agreed, and Kelsey helped Helena climb into the bed. She lay down gingerly, as if afraid of ruining the clean sheets. Lucy, more at ease, climbed up beside her, sitting cross-legged with her doll in her lap. Kelsey told them a story about two young princesses who got lost in a forest and found their way home by following the stars. As the tale unfolded, Lucy began to yawn. By the time he finished, she was ready to return to her room. "Good night, Helena," Lucy said, hugging her new friend quickly. "Let's play again tomorrow." After Lucy left, Kelsey tucked the blanket around Helena, who was still quietly taking in the room. "Are you comfortable?" he asked. Helena nodded and nestled deeper into the pillow. "I've never slept in a bed like this before," she said softly. Kelsey smiled gently and brushed a hand over her damp hair. "Good night, Helena. I'll be right here if you need anything." He turned off the overhead light, leaving only the glow of the night lamp, and made his way toward the door. Before stepping out, he paused and looked back. Helena's eyes were beginning to close, her small body sinking into the warmth of the bed. For the first time in what must have been a very long while, she was falling asleep without fear. Outside the window, snow continued to fall, in a quiet, steady rhythm, blanketing the world in soft white. Inside, something equally gentle and sacred was unfolding, a bond, a beginning, perhaps even the shape of a family. Kelsey thought of Hillary. She would have welcomed Helena with open arms without a moment's hesitation. After all, it was Christmas. And maybe, just maybe, miracles still had room to happen. The first rays of morning sunlight filtered through the guest room curtains, casting golden streaks across the soft rug. Helena stirred under the covers, her small frame shifting slightly as her eyes fluttered open. For a moment she looked confused, uncertain of where she was. Then the memories of the night before began to return. This warm house, the delicious dinner, the hot bath, the impossibly soft bed. She sat up slowly, blinking at her surroundings, needing to see it all again, to believe it had really happened. The room seemed even more beautiful in the daylight, soft blue walls, a sturdy wardrobe made of dark wood, and an oval mirror mounted above a small dresser. Everything looked like it had come straight from one of the storybooks her mother used to find at thrift stores when she could. A sudden pang twisted in Helena's chest at the thought of her mother. It had only been 2 weeks yet. It already felt like a lifetime. The days on the streets after her mother never woke up again were a blur of fear and confusion. She hadn't known where to go or what to do. She had stayed close to places she vaguely recognized, searching for scraps of food, curling up in hidden corners to sleep. But now she was here, in this gentle, warm place. It felt too good to be real. As she tried to stand, a wave of dizziness came over her. Her head throbbed and her throat was dry and sore. She assumed it must be from oversleeping something she hadn't done in so long she'd almost forgotten what it felt like. For as long as she could remember, her nights had been broken by noise, cold, or fear. She slowly swung her feet onto the floor. The warmth of the rug beneath her bare feet was startling, a comfort so foreign it almost brought tears to her eyes. She padded over to the window and pulled the curtain back slightly. The front yard was blanketed in fresh, untouched snow, sparkling like crushed glass in the soft morning sun. It looked like something out of a postcard. A soft knock on the door broke her gaze. Before she could answer, the door creaked open slightly and Lucy's head peeked in. Her brown hair was tousled from sleep. "You're awake," Lucy exclaimed, stepping fully into the room. She was wearing different pajamas than the night before, this pair decorated with tiny cartoon penguins. "Merry Christmas!" Helena blinked, momentarily stunned. She had completely forgotten it was Christmas Day. "Merry Christmas?" she replied, her voice rougher than she expected. Lucy tilted her head, studying her with concern. "Are you okay? Your voice sounds weird." Helena swallowed, wincing as pain flared in her throat. "I think I'm sick." She admitted, the realization sinking in. It wasn't surprising, given the cold nights she had endured lately. Lucy frowned, clearly worried. "I'll get my dad. He always knows what to do when I'm sick." Before Helena could protest, Lucy had darted out the door. She sat down on the edge of the bed, suddenly exhausted just from standing for a few minutes. Now that she acknowledged she wasn't well, other symptoms emerged: achiness throughout her body, a deep chill that had nothing to do with the room's temperature, and a heaviness in her head that made it hard to focus. Moments later, Kelsey appeared at the door with Lucy right behind him. His expression was filled with concern. "Good morning, Helena," he said gently as he stepped into the room. "Lucy told me you're not feeling well." Helena nodded, not trusting her voice to say more. Kelsey knelt beside the bed and placed his hand lightly on her forehead. His brow furrowed. "You're running warm," he observed. "I'll get a thermometer." While he stepped out, Lucy sat beside Helena on the edge of the bed. "Don't worry," she said with the certainty of a child who'd been through plenty of colds. "Dad always makes me better fast. He makes tea with honey and tells stories." Helena tried to smile, but even that small effort drained her. Kelsey returned with a digital thermometer, a glass of water, and a small box of children's medicine. He asked Helena to open her mouth and gently place the thermometer under her tongue. A soft beep sounded. 100.48 degrees Fahrenheit, he read aloud. "Not too high, but we need to take care of it." With practiced ease, Kelsey gave her a dose of fever-reducing medicine and made sure she drank a full glass of water. "I'll make some tea to help your throat," he said, standing, "and I'll bring in an extra blanket. Just rest for now." Helena obediently lay back down. Kelsey fluffed her pillow and helped her settle in, making sure she was propped up comfortably. "We could turn on the TV so she can watch cartoons," Lucy suggested, brightening a little. "That's what I always do when I'm sick." Kelsey smiled at her suggestion. "That's a great idea, Lucy. Why don't you show Helena how to use the remote? I'll go start the tea and be right back." As Kelsey stepped out of the room, Lucy picked up the remote and scooted closer to Helena. The weight of being unwell still pulled heavily on Helena's body, but something about Lucy's presence, her casual kindness, made it a little easier to bear. The morning light continued to pour through the curtains, warming the room with a soft, golden glow. And for a child who had spent so many nights in the cold, this warmth, both physical and emotional, felt like the first real Christmas gift she had ever received. While Kelsey stepped out of the room to prepare tea, Lucy picked up the small television remote from the top of the dresser. She climbed onto the edge of the bed and settled herself beside Helena, gripping the remote with a sense of purpose. Her little fingers moved with precision, and her face wore the serious expression of someone passing down sacred knowledge. "This one turns it on and off," she explained, pressing the button gently and waiting for the screen to light up. "This one changes the channels, and these two make it louder or quieter." Helena watched closely, curious despite the aching in her body. She had never had a television of her own, and the only glimpses she had gotten were through shop windows or on rare occasions when her mother brought her along while cleaning someone's house. Lucy found a cartoon channel, adjusted the volume to a comfortable level, then surprised Helena by not leaving. Instead, Lucy tucked her feet under her and made herself comfortable on the bed. "I'll stay with you until you feel better," she said simply, with the calm certainty of a 5-year-old who believed in kindness as a rule, not an exception. Helena stared at her, unsure how to respond. She wasn't used to people wanting to be near her, especially when she wasn't feeling well. Her mother, of course, had cared for her, but even then, work often kept her away. Most of the time, Helena managed on her own, sick or not. "You don't have to," she said hoarsely, her voice strained. "I know," Lucy answered with a shrug, "but I want to. Being sick alone is boring." Helena gave her a small, hesitant smile, one that came from a place of surprise and quiet gratitude. Just the day before, they had been strangers. Now, Lucy was treating her like an old friend. Kelsey returned a few minutes later, carrying a tray with both hands. On it sat a steaming mug of tea, a few slices of toast with jam, and a tiny jar of honey. He placed it on the nightstand carefully. "The tea should help your throat," he said as he handed Helena the mug. "And you should try to eat something, even just a little. It helps your body fight infection." Helena accepted the cup, feeling the warmth radiate through the ceramic into her palms. The tea smelled faintly herbal, and the golden tint from the honey made it look like liquid sunshine. "I already added some honey," Kelsey said, sensing her curiosity. "It should soothe your throat." She took a cautious sip. The warmth slid down gently, offering a small but instant comfort. The sweetness was soft, not overpowering, and it settled in her chest like a calm sigh. "Good?" Kelsey asked. Helena nodded and took another sip. "Thank you," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. She still wasn't used to this kind of attention from someone who expected nothing in return. "You're welcome," Kelsey said warmly. Then he turned to Lucy. "Have you had breakfast yet?" Lucy shook her head. "I wanted to stay with Helena." Kelsey paused, then nodded with approval. "I'll bring you something here so you two can stay together. And later, when Helena's feeling better, we can open some Christmas presents." Lucy's eyes lit up at the mention of gifts, but she didn't budge from Helena's side. Kelsey returned moments later with another tray, this one holding cereal, sliced fruit, and a glass of milk for Lucy. The rest of the morning passed in a gentle rhythm. Kelsey moved in and out of the room, checking Helena's temperature, refreshing her water, adjusting blankets. Lucy stayed close, watching cartoons, occasionally turning to explain bits of the show to Helena, especially when she noticed her new friend didn't seem familiar with the characters. By midday, Helena began to feel a little better. The medicine had reduced her fever, and the tea had softened the soreness in her throat. She still felt weak, but the edge of her discomfort had dulled. "Do you want to draw with me later?" Lucy asked, noticing the change. "I can get my colored pencils." Helena considered it. Drawing sounded pleasant, familiar in a way she hadn't felt in a long time. "I'd like that," she said softly, her voice still raspy but stronger. Lucy beamed and scampered off to fetch her supplies. She returned with a box of colored pencils, some crayons, and a few sheets of white paper. They spread everything out on the bed, and Lucy immediately began sketching what looked like a house with a big tree beside it. Helena picked up a blue pencil and slowly started her own drawing. Her strokes were cautious at first, as though she were relearning the motions. She couldn't remember the last time she had drawn, just for the joy of it. As the girls murmured quietly to each other, pointing out details in their sketches, Kelsey stood in the doorway, his expression layered with emotion. There was worry. Helena still looked fragile, and he couldn't help but wonder how long she had been exposed to the cold before she'd ended up in his driveway. But more than that, he felt something settling in his chest, something like completeness. A gap he hadn't even realized was now filled. He watched how Lucy engaged with Helena, her patience, her gentleness, the ease with which she shared. It was different from how she had interacted with other kids. Perhaps it was the loss they both carried unspoken yet understood that had created this quiet bond. A shared language of grief and healing that neither had to explain. And for the first time in a long while, Kelsey Harold let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, something good was beginning again inside these four walls. Kelsey moved quietly down the hallway and into his home office, his steps slow and deliberate. The room smelled faintly of cedar and old books, a comforting scent that had always reminded him of winter afternoons spent working from home when Hillary was still alive. He opened a drawer and began to sift through its contents, pushing aside some old birthday cards, papers, and forgotten tools until he found what he was looking for. A small gift wrapped in pale blue ribbon. It was a doll, one he had bought months ago with the intention of giving it to Lucy for her birthday. Somehow, the timing had never felt right, but today, this moment felt like the right one. The doll wasn't as elaborate as Princess Star, but she had her own charm, a simple elegance. Her brown hair was curled neatly, and she wore a golden dress that shimmered slightly in the light. Kelsey paused for a beat, then carefully tucked the package behind his back and made his way upstairs. The girls were still deeply immersed in their drawings, swapping colored pencils and sharing quiet observations about each other's artwork. Helena had drawn a dark blue sky dotted with stars above a small, cozy-looking house. Kelsey stepped closer and glanced over her shoulder. "That's beautiful," he said, and Helena flushed with a mixture of surprise and embarrassment. Compliments weren't something she heard often, and she ducked her head shyly. "Thank you," she mumbled, eyes still on her drawing. Kelsey knelt beside the bed and revealed the small package. "I thought you might like this," he said, extending the gift. Helena's eyes widened. She looked at Kelsey, then down at the neatly wrapped present, unsure how to respond. "For me?" she asked, her voice so soft it barely rose above a whisper. "Yes," Kelsey replied warmly. "Everyone deserves a Christmas gift." Helena's fingers trembled as she reached for the package. She held it as though it were something precious and fragile, unsure what to do next. "You can open it," Lucy encouraged, nearly bouncing with excitement. "I love opening presents." With the caution of someone unaccustomed to receiving anything new, Helena began to unwrap the gift slowly. Her fingers worked carefully, untying the ribbon, peeling back the tape without tearing the paper. It was clear that the act of opening was as meaningful as whatever lay inside. When the paper finally fell away and she saw the brown-haired doll in the golden dress, Helena froze. She stared silent and still, her expression a mixture of awe and disbelief. I've never had anything like this before," she whispered, voice tight with emotion. Kelsey felt his throat constrict. That one simple sentence carried with it a weight far too large for a child to bear. "She's beautiful," Lucy chimed in. "What are you going to name her?" Helena traced a finger across the doll's smooth plastic face, as if checking to see if it was real. "I don't know," she admitted. "I've never named a doll before." "Take your time," Kelsey said gently. "There's no rush." Helena nodded, still gazing at the doll in wonder as Lucy launched into ideas for how this new addition could join the adventures of Princess Star and Lily. She talked about tea parties, forest quests, and secret missions that would now include a trio of brave heroines. The rest of the day passed quietly. Helena's fever crept back in during the afternoon, but a second dose of medicine and more herbal tea helped ease it. Kelsey brought a light lunch, chicken soup, and toast, and Helena managed to eat a little. Later, the girls took turns opening the remaining Christmas gifts. Lucy insisted that Helena help treating her like she had always been part of their holiday traditions. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, casting soft amber light across the room, Helena began to tire. Her eyelids drooped, and her hands rested in her lap, loosely holding her new doll. "I think it's time for a little rest," Kelsey suggested gently. Even Lucy agreed, nodding as she yawned. "Dad and I are going to the kitchen," she said. "We'll make something nice for dinner, and I'll come back soon." Reluctantly, she followed Kelsey out, leaving Helena alone for a while. Helena sat back against the pillows, cradling the doll. She stared down at it, her brow furrowed in thought. It still felt surreal that this belonged to her, that she had been given something with no strings attached. The kindness she had received in this house was baffling. Why were they being so nice to her? How long could this possibly last? In her short life, Helena had learned never to grow attached. Her mother used to say, "Don't get used to places or things. You never know when you'll have to leave." That lesson had been learned the hard way. When Kelsey returned later with a tray of warm soup and another slice of toast, Helena had made a decision. She held the doll tightly in her arms, pressing it close to her chest, as if it were the most valuable thing she owned, which to her it was. "Thank you," she said softly after a few sips of soup. Her voice trembled. "For everything. For the room, the food, the doll. But I think it's time for me to go." Kelsey, who had just adjusted her blanket, froze. He looked at her surprised. "Go? Where would you go?" Helena looked away, not answering. The truth was, she had nowhere to go. She just couldn't imagine staying here any longer, imposing on their kindness, disrupting their lives. Kelsey sat down beside her and shook his head gently. "You're still sick, Helena. And it's snowing outside." He paused for a moment, choosing his words with care. "You can stay here," he said softly, "at least until I figure out what the right next step is." Elena lifted her eyes to meet his, searching his face for any sign of insincerity, but all she saw was concern and compassion. "Really?" she asked, voice barely audible. "Really," Kelsey confirmed, offering a small smile. "Now get some rest. We'll talk more tomorrow." Elena nodded slowly, nestling back into the pillows. The doll remained in her arms, her grip firm. For the first time in a long while, she felt safe. Outside the window, the snow continued to fall, blanketing the world in white. Inside the house, something warmer than the fireplace flickered quietly into life, an unexpected connection, fragile but real, taking root in the most unlikely of seasons. When Kelsey Harold quietly stepped out of the room, Helena leaned back against her pillow, the soft cotton warming beneath her head. She kept the new doll clutched to her chest, fingers curled gently around its waist. Through the window above the bed, she could see snowflakes drifting down slowly, lazily, catching the glow from the backyard garden lights. The world outside was dark and cold, but inside this house it felt safe. It felt warm. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, she didn't have to be afraid. Maybe, just maybe, she could stay a little longer, at least until she felt better, at least until Mr. Harold decided what to do. And while she waited, she could pretend just for a little while that this was her place, that she belonged here, in this home, with this family. That comforting thought wrapped around her like a second blanket as she slowly closed her eyes. The doll nestled close to her chest. Helena drifted into a sleep deeper and more peaceful than any she could remember. Days passed slowly, then weeks. January arrived in a flurry of thick snow and bitter wind, the kind that coated tree branches in white and made even the shortest walk outside feel like an expedition. But inside Kelsey Harold's home, a different kind of warmth took hold. Helena recovered from her illness within the first few days, thanks to the steady care and rest. True to his word, Kelsey had contacted social services shortly after Christmas. He explained the situation honestly, and after a visit from Miss Carter, a kind-eyed social worker who took copious notes and asked Helena a few gentle questions, the authorities granted him emergency temporary custody. It was the holidays, after all, and the alternative would have meant placing Helena back into the system alone. There would be more paperwork, more visits, more decisions down the line, but for now, Helena could stay. At first, she moved through the house like she was walking on glass, careful not to be too loud, too messy, too present. She folded the borrowed clothes with clinical precision and made the guest bed each morning, with corners tight enough to pass inspection. She asked permission for everything. A glass of water, a spot on the couch, the remote control. "Helena, this is your home now," Kelsey would gently remind her whenever he caught her hesitating. "You don't need to ask. Just be comfortable." Gradually, and in ways too small to measure, at first Helena began to relax. One quiet morning, Kelsey found her in the kitchen, already dressed and seated at the table, watching the coffee maker burble and steam. "Do you like the smell?" he asked, his voice still gravelly with sleep. Helena nodded. "It's nice. My mom loved coffee, but we didn't have it very often." Her voice didn't wobble the way it had before when she spoke of her mother. That, too, was progress. It became a ritual. Morning started with Helena at the table watching the steam rise while Kelsey brewed his cup. She didn't drink coffee. Hot chocolate was still her beverage of choice, but she liked the scent and the warmth and the way the kitchen felt alive in those quiet minutes. Lucy, too, changed. Before Helena had come, she'd often cloister herself in her room for hours, withdrawn silent, her world reduced to the company of her dolls and the still ceiling above her bed. Now she was out in the common spaces, in the living room, in Helena's room, scheming new games, inventing stories. One afternoon, Kelsey returned home from the office to find the living room transformed. Couch cushions had been repurposed into fort walls. Bed sheets became tents, stretched across dining chairs and end tables. From within this handmade kingdom came bursts of laughter. And then Princess Star said, "I'm not afraid of dragons." That was Lucy's voice, confident and bright, more alive than he'd heard it in months. And Daisy said, "Me neither." Helena's voice chimed in, followed by shared giggles. Kelsey stood still, just listening. Daisy. That was the name Helena had eventually chosen for her doll with the yellow dress. She'd taken days to decide, testing each name with solemn care before announcing it over dinner one evening. Afternoons began filling with crayons and sketch pads. Kelsey had brought home a large pad of blank paper and a fresh box of colored pencils, and both girls spent hours sprawled across the floor, creating their shared universe. The refrigerator door quickly became an art gallery. Castles, unicorns, brave princesses, and always 3 figures standing hand in hand. A tall man, a girl with pigtails, a second girl with curly dark hair. Kelsey recognized the drawing every time. There were quiet moments, too. After dinner, the 3 of them often settled on the living room sofa to watch a movie or a children's program. In the early days, Helena would sit on the far edge, maintaining a respectful distance, her posture upright and guarded. She watched the screen, but her body was always tense, as if unsure whether she truly belonged. Yet as the weeks passed, something subtle changed. That distance shortened little by little. Then one night, without realizing it, Helena rested her head against Kelsey Harold's arm as they watched an animated film about lions. Kelsey glanced down, startled by the gentle contact. She had almost fallen asleep, her breathing slow and deep, her frame softened in trust. In that small moment, her defenses had lowered, and she had let herself lean on someone. Literally, and maybe emotionally too. The nights brought their own transformations. The first few weeks were punctuated by nightmares. Helena would wake crying, calling for her mother in the dark, her voice breaking with fear. Kelsey would rush to her room, finding her curled up tight under the covers, shaking, not just from the dream, but from the shame of possibly waking others. She always seemed to fear she had done something wrong. Sitting by her side, Kelsey spoke to her in a calm, steady voice. Sometimes he told her a story. Sometimes he just stayed, letting her know he was there until she could fall back asleep. Slowly, the nightmares grew less frequent. The nights became quieter. Helena began sleeping through the night, held in the safety of knowing that when she awoke, the world would still be steady around her. A new routine began to take shape. Kelsey enrolled Helena at the same elementary school Lucy attended. Miss Carter from Social Services helped gather the necessary paperwork and explain the situation to the school staff. On the first day, Helena held tightly onto Lucy's hand as they walked to the school gate. Lucy, full of pride and purpose, pointed out where things were, introduced Helena to classmates, and stayed close during recess like a protective guide. "How was school?" Kelsey asked that afternoon as he drove them home. "Good," Helena replied softly from the back seat. "The teacher was really nice. They have a big library with so many books." Helena read an entire story out loud to the class. Lucy added her voice full of admiration. The teacher was super impressed. Helena blushed, shrinking slightly under the praise, but Kelsey saw the small smile blooming across her face in the rear-view mirror. Every little victory was celebrated. Her first A on a school assignment earned a place of honor on the refrigerator. The first time she asked if she could invite a friend over was met with a smile and immediate planning. And when Helena drew a picture and wanted it hung in her room not the guest room anymore, Kelsey gladly helped her tape it to the pale green wall. That color had been her choice. Soft green. Her favorite. Kelsey felt the change within himself as well. The pain of losing Hillary hadn't disappeared. It never would. But now, it lived beside other emotions. There was purpose in preparing school lunches, joy in hearing the girls laugh from down the hall, peace in cleaning up toys and finding drawings left on the counter. There was a rhythm to it all. And when Lucy came bursting back into life and Helena slowly unfolded from fear into curiosity, Kelsey felt something shift inside his heart. Mornings used to carry a heavy silence. Now they were filled with movement, little feet pattering down the hallway, bursts of giggles from around corners, and debates over which cartoon to watch before school. The house had come alive again. Kelsey often found himself pausing in doorways, watching them, letting the fullness of the moment soak in. The simple sound of their voices brought a warmth deeper than any fireplace could offer. One such afternoon he stood at the edge of the living room, watching them sit cross-legged on the carpet. Around them lay scattered drawings, dolls in dramatic poses, and a few mismatched crayons. Their heads were close together, whispering, planning, laughing. The sunlight slanted through the window, painting everything in a soft gold. In that moment, Kelsey understood something clearly. The sorrow that once seemed to consume every corner of this home had started to recede, not vanish, but transform. What had once been a weight of grief was now yielding to a steadier, more grounded kind of joy. Not the kind that erased the past, but the kind born from surviving it. A joy that came from knowing how fragile life could be and from treasuring each moment that felt real and right. A quiet, resilient joy that was beginning to fill every room and every corner of their home and of his heart. February arrived with a sharper edge than December, its bitter winds rushing through the city streets like a warning. The snow no longer held the charm of the holidays. It was no longer soft or inviting. Now it was crusted and gray, piled high on sidewalks, packed solid against curbs, and slicking over the roads in invisible patches. The trees, stripped bare of any last stubborn leaves, stood like sketches in charcoal against the overcast sky. The light outside faded early, casting a bluish hue over everything by late afternoon. Inside, Kelsey Harold sat in his home office, a mug of coffee slowly cooling beside a stack of work papers. He rubbed his temples, squinting at the screen before him. The past several weeks had been a careful balancing act, a dance of priorities between his professional obligations and the new demands of life at home. He had reduced his office hours, negotiated remote days, and reshuffled his calendar to be present for the small but significant moments. School meetings, doctor's visits, the routines that helped the girls feel safe. Miss Carter, the social worker, had been visiting regularly, her most recent report painting a positive picture. Helena was adjusting well, attending school, showing signs of healthy adaptation. But beneath each conversation, behind the clipped notes and polite smiles, lingered unspoken questions. What would happen long term? Were there any relatives who might step forward? What would permanent guardianship look like? Kelsey knew those questions wouldn't stay unspoken forever. Temporary custody had an expiration date. A soft knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. He looked up to see Lucy standing in the doorway, cradling her fabric doll tightly against her chest. Her expression was thoughtful in that unsettling way that sometimes made Kelsey forget she was only 5 years old. "Hey there, princess," he greeted, turning his chair to face her. "What's on your mind?" "Can I stay here with you?" she asked. "Helena's resting." Helena had caught a mild cold, not serious, but enough for her teacher to recommend she stay home for a day or two. Lucy, ever the protector, had taken it upon herself to keep watch, bringing her water, telling her stories, playing nurse with an earnest sense of duty. "Of course," Kelsey said, holding out his arms. "Come on in." Lucy crossed the room and climbed into his lap, settling into the familiar nook against his chest. She leaned her head against his shoulder and let out a sigh so deep it seemed to carry the weight of all the thoughts swirling in her little head. They sat that way in silence for a few minutes. Kelsey could feel her breathing slow, the slight warmth of her body pressed against his. Her hair brushed lightly against his chin, soft and faintly scented with the lavender shampoo she always protested using. Moments like this, quiet and still, always hit him hardest. She had grown so much in the past few months, not just taller though, that too, but in ways that couldn't be measured with a ruler. There was something older in the way she carried herself, a tenderness in how she treated Helena. A depth to her questions that tugged at him. "What are you thinking about, kiddo?" he asked gently, sensing there was more behind her uncharacteristic quiet. Lucy took her time answering. She fiddled with a button on his shirt, her eyes focused on the tiny thread. "Dad," she said finally, her voice small, "is Helena going to leave?" The question hit him in the gut, not because it hadn't crossed his own mind, it had, but hearing it out loud in that fragile voice made it more real, more immediate. "Why are you asking that now?" he replied, stalling for time. Lucy didn't look up. She kept working the button between her fingers. "I heard you talking to that lady, the one who comes to see Helena. Miss Carter." "Yes. You said something about long-term arrangements and options. That means she's going away, doesn't it?" Kelsey felt a pang of regret. He had tried to keep those conversations discreet, but of course Lucy, with her keen ears and sharper heart, had picked up pieces. Like most children, she had filled in the gaps with her own interpretations, usually worst-case scenarios. "Not necessarily," he said carefully. "Miss Carter is doing her job making sure we're taking good care of Helena and thinking about what's best for her going forward. But will she have to go to a different family?" Lucy's voice cracked just slightly, the tremor in it catching him off guard. "We haven't made any decisions yet, sweetheart," he said. "We're just talking through the possibilities." Finally, Lucy looked up, locking eyes with him in a way that was both unnerving and deeply moving. "I always wanted a sister," she said with a conviction that came from deep within. "Now I have one. We can't make her go away." There was something so simple and honest in that statement. Now I have one. No ceremony, no grand declarations. At some point over the past few weeks, Helena had stopped being a guest and become something else entirely, a sister. Not a visitor, not a temporary companion. A sister. "Helena's happy here," Lucy went on, her little voice brimming with certainty. "She smiles now. She tells stories. She doesn't have nightmares every night anymore. If she goes away, she'll be sad again. And I'll be sad. And you'll be sad." The logic, however childlike, was unassailable. Kelsey felt himself nodding, not because he had a solution, but because he couldn't deny the truth in her words. "Besides," Lucy added, her eyes narrowing as she prepared her closing argument, "she has a room here now, with green walls, and her dolls will miss her if she goes to a different school. Just imagine how sad they'd be if she left forever." Kelsey couldn't help but smile at that, the kind of smile born of both affection and heartbreak. But behind it, his mind was already turning. The truth was, he had been wrestling with this for weeks, going over options, replaying conversations with Miss Carter, weighing every outcome. And while the visits from the social worker had remained friendly, encouraging, even they were also reminders. Time was ticking. A decision would need to be made. Soon. Dad Lucy's voice gently pulled Kelsey Harold back to the present. "Did you hear me?" "Yes, sweetheart," he said, reassuring her with a soft smile. "I'm just thinking about what you said." Outside the window of his home office, fresh snow had begun to fall again, thin, hesitant flakes drifting lazily through the February sky. The sun had long since disappeared behind thick gray clouds, and the air had the heavy stillness of a storm settling in. Kelsey turned his gaze from the snow to his daughter curled up in his lap with her cloth doll tucked under one arm. Her face was serious, contemplative in a way that still caught him off guard. For only being 5, Lucy carried herself with the awareness of someone older, someone who had seen loss and found a way to keep moving. Kelsey thought about what these last 2 months had brought. The home had changed in 100 quiet ways since Helena arrived. Lucy had reemerged from the silent shell she'd built after Hillary passed, her laughter no longer rare, her footsteps again echoing through the halls. And Helena, her cautious steps growing steadier, her guarded eyes brighter, her smile real. Each day she seemed to believe a little more that the ground beneath her feet wouldn't vanish, that maybe this could last. He breathed deeply. In truth, the decision had probably been made that morning on Christmas Day, when he'd first seen the small girl rifling through the garbage, searching for something, anything to hold on to. "I think you're right, Lucy," he said softly, kissing the crown of her head. "We'd all be very sad if Helena had to leave." Lucy's face lifted toward his, her eyes brimming with hope. "So she can stay forever." Kelsey nodded, though his voice carried the weight of all the unknowns ahead. "I'm going to do everything I can to make that happen," he promised. "There's a lot of paperwork, a lot of steps. I'll need to talk with Miss Carter and a judge. But yes, if Helena wants to stay, and if everyone agrees, it can be forever." Lucy threw her arms around his neck and squeezed with all her tiny strength. "Thank you, Daddy," she whispered into his shoulder. "You're the best dad in the world." Kelsey closed his eyes for a moment, holding her close. The road ahead wouldn't be simple, adoption never was. But some choices once made by the heart simply had to be followed. The next morning, he woke up with a sense of clarity he hadn't felt in months. Sitting on the edge of his bed, he stared for a long time at the framed photo of Hillary on the nightstand. She was smiling in that familiar way, head-tilted eyes sparkling with the suggestion of an inside joke. "What would you think of all this, Hill?" he asked quietly. He didn't expect an answer, of course, but somehow he already knew. Hillary had always loved fiercely and freely. She would have opened their home to Helena without hesitation. After breakfast, while the girls were lost in a cartoon on the living room TV, Kelsey slipped back into his office and picked up the phone. Miss Carter answered after the second ring. "Mr. Harold, what a surprise. I believe we're scheduled to meet next week." I know Kelsey replied more firmly than he'd intended, but I've made a decision and I didn't want to wait. I want to start the adoption process for Helena. There was a pause on the other end of the line, brief but telling. Then came Miss Carter's voice, measured and calm, but with a hint of warmth. "I see," she said. "I have to admit I suspected this might be where things were headed. It's clear Helena has settled well with you and your daughter. So, it's possible," Kelsey asked, his tone surprised by how easily she received the news. "It's possible," she confirmed. "Not easy, not fast, but possible. There are steps, Mr. Harold, many of them. We'll need updated assessments, financial, psychological, a full background check, additional home visits, and parenting classes. And, of course, we'll need to explore whether there are any living relatives who might come forward with a claim. As far as we know, there's no one," Kelsey said. "Helena's mother didn't maintain contact with any family, at least not according to what Helena's told us. We'll need to verify that naturally. It's a standard part of the process," Miss Carter said. "But if there truly are no relatives, and considering the bond that's clearly formed between you all, your chances are promising." Kelsey felt a cautious relief begin to settle in his chest. "What do I need to do next? I'll email you the initial forms today," Miss Carter said. "Take your time with them. Fill them out completely. Once we have them back, we'll set up a meeting to outline next steps." She paused. "And Mr. Harold, have you spoken to Helena about this yet?" "Not yet." He admitted. "I didn't want to raise her hopes until I was sure this was a real possibility." "That's understandable," she replied, "but that conversation should happen soon. Her input is important, especially since she's old enough to express her wishes." "I'll talk to her today," Kelsey promised. As he ended the call, he sat still for a long moment, looking again at the falling snow beyond the window. Something about the flakes today, slower, more deliberate, matched the steadiness of what he now felt. Not certainty exactly, but commitment. A quiet, unwavering resolve to fight for the life that had begun to take root in his home. Helena wasn't just a guest anymore. She was part of the family. After ending the call, Kelsey Harold sat still for a moment, letting the weight of the conversation with Miss Carter settle in his chest. Everything now felt more tangible, more real. There was still a long road ahead filled with legal steps and the usual uncertainty, but the first step had been taken. He drew a slow, deliberate breath and pushed himself up from the desk, making his way back to the living room. There, the soft glow of the morning sun filtered through the windows, bouncing off the walls in warm, amber tones. Helena and Lucy were still in the same spot, but the animated show had ended. Now the girls sat cross-legged on the carpet, surrounded by dolls, immersed in an elaborate, imaginative adventure filled with dramatic rescues and magical powers. Helena's voice carried a quiet confidence now, while Lucy's bursts of enthusiasm punctuated their pretend tale. "Helena," Kelsey said gently, his tone calm and even. "Could we talk for a minute, just the two of us?" The girl looked up surprised. Lucy's gaze shifted between them, her small brow furrowing in mild protest. "Is it a secret?" she asked, not trying to hide her irritation at being excluded. "Not really," Kelsey replied with a soft smile. "But I need to speak with Helena first. I promise we'll tell you right after." Lucy pouted slightly, then shrugged and turned her attention back to the dolls. "Okay, but don't be too long." Helena followed Kelsey into the kitchen, her small feet barely making a sound against the hardwood floor. Her expression was a mix of curiosity and concern. Since coming into their home, private conversations had often signaled change meetings with social workers, new routines, school plans. She sat at the table when Kelsey motioned to the chair beside him. He didn't sit across from her. He sat beside her, wanting the moment to feel even not authoritative. "Helena," he began, choosing his words with care. "You've been with us for almost 2 months now. How do you feel about living here?" She paused, her fingers playing with the corner of the placemat. "Good," she answered after a moment. "I like it here." "Are you happy?" he asked softly. A small smile crept onto her face. "Yes." Kelsey felt his chest loosen just a bit. Her answer was simple, honest. He nodded, encouraged. "This morning I called Miss Carter," he continued. "Do you know what adoption is, Helena?" Her eyes widened slightly, and she shook her head. "It's when someone becomes the mom or dad of a child they didn't give birth to," he explained gently. "That person chooses the child to be part of their family forever. and the child chooses too if they want to be part of that family. Helena listened still and intent. "Helena," he said, his voice low and earnest, "would you want to be my daughter, officially? Would you want me to be your dad, not just for now, but for always?" The question hung in the air, suspended between them. She looked up at him, trying to read beyond the words, trying to see if there was some catch, some condition. "I know I can't replace your mom," Kelsey added after a long pause. "No one can. She'll always be your mom. You'll always love her, and that's okay. But if you'd like, we can be your family now. Lucy already thinks of you as her sister. And me." His voice tightened, catching with emotion. "I would be honored to be your father." She didn't speak right away. Her eyes stayed on him, searching, scanning, processing. Kelsey could see the flicker of feelings on her face, shocked disbelief, a cautious hope. "You don't have to answer now," he reassured. "It's a big decision. You can think about it." "Yes." Helena interrupted quietly, her voice almost inaudible, then louder with more clarity. "Yes, I want to be your daughter." Something inside Kelsey broke free, some final wall he hadn't realized he'd built. He opened his arms and Helena dove into them, burying her face in his chest. "I'm going to call child services today," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "We'll start the adoption process." Helena stayed perfectly still, tucked into his arms like something fragile and sacred. For a long moment, she didn't move, as if worried the magic might vanish. But then gently, her small body began to tremble, not with sobs, but with silent tears, tears that soaked into Kelsey's shirt. Just then, Lucy appeared in the kitchen doorway, drawn by the lengthening silence. "What's going on?" she asked, her face tightening with concern when she saw Helena crying. "Why is she crying?" Kelsey opened one arm to her, beckoning her into the embrace. "Helena's staying with us forever," he said. "We're going to adopt her. She'll officially be your sister." Lucy's eyes lit up like the morning sun breaking through gray clouds. "Really, forever?" Kelsey nodded, and Lucy launched herself at Helena, wrapping her arms around her with all the strength she had. "I knew it," she squealed, nearly bouncing with joy. "I knew you'd stay. Now we're real sisters." Helena finally lifted her head, tears still on her cheeks, but now paired with a shy, radiant smile. Kelsey closed his eyes for a moment, pulling both girls close. Inside, he felt something shifting, a quiet, profound change. The sharp, lingering pain of losing Hillary had not vanished. It never truly would. But it was transforming into something else, something grounded in purpose, in forward motion, in the tender strength to love again. It wasn't replacement. It was renewal. A deep, sustaining kind of love was blooming in its place. And in the shared laughter of the girls, one full of spark, the other, still soft but genuine Kelsey, knew with certainty. Together, they were building something new. From the scattered pieces of what had once been lost, they were becoming a family. The next morning dawned with a sky so strikingly blue, it felt as if the universe itself had decided to celebrate their decision. Snow had fallen steadily through the night, leaving everything outside blanketed in a thick, glistening layer. Under the bright winter sun, the world shimmered almost too perfect to be real, like a setting pulled from the pages of a children's fairy tale. Inside the Harold home, warmth radiated not just from the heating vents, but from something deeper, something more profound, the sense of a future just beginning to take shape. Kelsey Harold awoke early, his mind already swimming with the practical steps that lay ahead. Forms to fill out, calls to make, protocols to follow. Miss Carter had been clear the adoption process would be long and complex. But today wasn't about bureaucracy. Today, he decided, would be about celebration. It was time to mark the moment not with paper and procedure, but with joy. When he came downstairs, still tugging his robe closed, he found Lucy and Helena already in the kitchen. They were both in their pajamas, barefoot on the tile heads, bent together in shared concentration. Lucy stood perched on a step stool, reaching into the cabinet for a box of cereal, while Helena methodically set the table, placing mismatched dishes and folded napkins with a level of care far beyond her years. "Good morning," Kelsey said, trying to mask the smile pulling at his lips. "Looks like we have some early rising chefs today." "We were making a surprise for you," Lucy explained with mild exasperation, hugging the cereal box to her chest. "But you got up too fast." Kelsey took in the table, a neat row of silverware napkins, crooked but folded, and even a plastic flower in a juice glass, serving as a centerpiece. "This is our first breakfast as an official family," Helena said. Her voice was quiet but steady. Kelsey felt something shift inside him. It was the way she said it with certainty. To her, the decision made yesterday wasn't pending, wasn't theoretical. It had already happened. This was real. This was home. As they sat down to eat, Kelsey shared his plan. "I think we should celebrate today. What do you say to a morning in the park? The sun's out, the snow is perfect for snowmen, and afterward we could grab some lunch together." The girls' faces lit up instantly. Days off during the week were rare. This one felt like a holiday carved out just for them. An hour later, the three of them were bundled in coats and scarves, their breaths turning to clouds in the cold morning air. The park was only a few blocks away, and they chose to walk. Kelsey held a small mittened hand in each of his own. Every so often, he'd lift both girls off the ground at once, making them squeal with laughter as their feet briefly left the snowy sidewalk. The park was pristine. The snow hadn't yet been trampled by other children. Trees stood like quiet sentinels, their branches heavy with white, their outlines sharp and crystalline. Helena ran ahead to the swing set, her face alight with wonder. Unlike Lucy, who had grown up playing here, this was still new for her. "Push me high," she called out, already gripping the chains of a swing with determined hands. Kelsey stood behind her, giving her a gentle push, at first testing her comfort. When he saw her confidence, he pushed harder, higher. Her legs kicked through the air as she laughed, hat askew, cheeks pink with cold. "Look how high I'm going," she shouted. "I'm almost touching the sky." Lucy, unwilling to be left behind, climbed into the neighboring swing. She started to pump her legs with the kind of pride that comes from mastering a new skill. Kelsey moved back and forth between the girls, giving an extra push when needed, soaking in the sound of their laughter. At the peak of each arc, Helena closed her eyes, face turned toward the sky, as if she could freeze time right there. "Look at me, Dad," she called out as she dangled upside down from the monkey bars. It was the first time she had said it, Dad, without hesitation, without correction. The word slipped out so naturally she didn't even seem to notice, but Kelsey felt it land like a weight in his chest, heavy and beautiful all at once. The playground adventures continued with slides and climbing frames and merry-go-rounds. They challenged each other to races and called Kelsey over to witness every minor achievement, every daring leap, every careful balance. When their energy began to wane, the idea of building a snowman took hold. Kelsey helped roll the large snowballs that would become the base and torso, while the girls scavenged the playground for accessories. Together they used small twigs for arms, a carrot from Kelsey's coat pocket for the nose, and stones for the eyes and buttons. They gave him a jaunty lean and a lopsided grin. Snow angels followed. The girls dropped onto their backs in the untouched snow, arms and legs sweeping out in wide arcs. Kelsey lay between them, staring up at the endless blue sky, listening to their giggles. The moment was ordinary in its activity, but extraordinary in what it meant. This wasn't just a day in the park. This was their first memory as a family, not in name only, but in the truest, most enduring sense of the word. And in that winter sunlight, surrounded by laughter and the crunch of snow, Kelsey Harold felt something settle into place. Not just hope, not just healing, but belonging. By midday, the sun stood high above, casting long, bright streaks across the snowy park. The girls' cheeks were flushed from the cold and their boundless activity. Their eyes sparkled with joy, and their stomachs rumbled with hunger. Kelsey Harold brushed a light dusting of snow from his coat sleeves, smiling as he called out, "Time for lunch, girls. I know a great diner nearby." The Silver Star Diner was a familiar spot in the neighborhood, a throwback to another time. It boasted vinyl red booths, black and white checkered floors, and a dusty jukebox resting in the corner that still occasionally worked. Photographs of Marilyn Monroe and Elvis Presley decorated the walls, adding to its mid-century Americana charm. Kelsey chose a booth by the window, the glass slightly fogged with condensation. Helena and Lucy slid into the seat beside each other, still buzzing with excitement from the snowy morning. A waitress with a kind smile and a name tag that read Nancy approached their table. Her eyes lit up when she saw Kelsey and Lucy. Well, what can the detective solve today?" she asked playfully, using the nickname she had given them during their many previous visits before Hillary Harold's passing. "Nancy, this is Helena," Kelsey introduced, placing a gentle hand on the girl's back. "She's part of our family now." Nancy's smile grew warmer. She leaned slightly toward Helena and said with genuine warmth, "Welcome, rookie detective. It's so nice to meet you." Helena gave a shy smile in return, clearly taken in by the friendly reception. They placed their orders, hamburgers and fries all around, and for dessert, milkshakes chocolate for Lucy, strawberry for Helena. When the tall glasses arrived crowned with generous swirls of whipped cream and topped with bright red cherries, Helena's eyes widened in wonder. She glanced at Lucy, who confidently lifted her glass and sipped through her straw, and then slowly mimicked the gesture. At the first sip, Helena's eyes closed in delight, and a small, delighted hum escaped her lips. You like it?" Kelsey asked, watching her reaction with quiet affection. Helena opened her eyes, a white mustache of whipped cream decorating her upper lip. "I didn't know anything this good existed," she said, smiling, her voice full of genuine wonder. "It's cold, but doesn't hurt my teeth. It's sweet, but not too sweet. It's perfect." Kelsey watched her, carefully moved by how she savored each sip like it was a rare and precious treat. For most children, a milkshake was ordinary, maybe even taken for granted. But for Helena, it was something magical, something extraordinary. In that moment, sitting in a humble diner on a quiet winter day, Kelsey was struck by how much his life had changed in just 2 months. His child had come into their lives on Christmas morning like an unexpected blessing. Helena was without a doubt the greatest Christmas gift he had ever received, a gift he hadn't known he needed, yet one that filled a space left hollow by grief, not replacing what was lost, but adding something new, something just as valuable. The days that followed were busy and full of purpose. Miss Carter visited again, this time carrying folders and forms that seemed to multiply with each meeting. Kelsey signed document after document, aware that the adoption process could stretch out for months, yet comforted by Miss Carter's optimistic tone. One of the first formal steps was enrolling Helena in the same school as Lucy. Until now, she had attended as a temporary student, but Kelsey had now submitted all the necessary paperwork listing himself as her legal guardian. The night before Helena's first official school day, Lucy had an idea as Kelsey braided her hair before bedtime. "Can we wear matching ribbons tomorrow?" she asked, her voice hopeful, "so everyone knows we're sisters." The suggestion lit something in Helena's eyes. She had never had hair accessories of her own, much less the experience of sharing something like this with a sibling. She nodded eagerly, and Kelsey, not wanting to disappoint either of them, searched through drawers until he found 2 identical blue ribbons. He practiced tying perfect bows, fumbling a bit at first, but determined to get it right. After all, it wasn't just about ribbons, it was about belonging, identity, and the joy of seeing his daughters take pride in their new bond as sisters. The morning of Helena's first official day at school, what the girls had gleefully dubbed their official day, was filled with a blend of excitement and quiet nerves. Though Helena had been attending the school for weeks now, something about this day felt different. The title, the permanence, the shift in how others might see her, no longer just the other girl staying with the heralds, but Helena Herald herself. The legal process was still unfolding, but in her heart she had already claimed the name, and that knowledge carried both a thrill and a tremble. Kelsey Herald had woken up early. He wanted this morning to be memorable, not just functional. He stood in the warm, golden light of the kitchen, flipping heart-shaped pancakes on the griddle while the scent of butter and syrup filled the air. By the time the girls entered, still rubbing the sleep from their eyes, breakfast was waiting. He'd helped them get dressed too carefully, tying identical blue bows into their hair. They looked polished and proud. "You both look beautiful," he said, unable to contain the pride in his voice. The most beautiful girls in the whole school, no doubt about it. The walk to school was lively and fast-paced, despite the chill in the air. Lucy rattled off tips and reminders like a seasoned tour guide, where to line up in the morning, which teachers were kindest, where the swings were less crowded at recess. Helena nodded politely, even though she already knew most of it. But she didn't interrupt. She understood that Lucy needed to say these things to play the big sister role. That was part of the magic of today. As they neared the school gate, Kelsey noticed Helena's hand reaching instinctively for Lucy's. It was a small gesture, one that spoke volumes. Lucy gave her a reassuring squeeze, her own posture firm, her shoulders squared like someone leading a march. Then, just before they went in, Kelsey called out, "Girls, wait a second." They paused and turned. He fished his phone from his coat pocket. "I want to capture this moment, your first official day together. Can you stand just there by the gate?" The girls obeyed, lining up shoulder to shoulder, hand in hand. The blue bows in their hair fluttered slightly in the morning breeze. Lucy gently placed her arm around Helena's shoulder, a protective gesture so instinctive it almost went unnoticed. Both smiled Lucy with her usual wide beam, Helena more shyly, but no less sincerely. Kelsey snapped the photo, preserving the moment forever. Then a passing mother, noticing the scene, offered to take one of all three. "Thank you," Kelsey said, warmly handing over his phone and positioning himself between the girls, wrapping an arm around each of them. "Say family," the woman called. "Family," they all chimed together, the word rising in the cold air, followed by laughter. The camera clicked. In the frame, Kelsey in the center, Lucy to his right, Helena to his left, united not just by proximity, but by something deeper, more lasting. The school loomed behind them. The sky above was pale and cloudless. That snapshot wasn't just a memento of a school day. It was the birth certificate of a new family. After the girls waved one last time and slipped through the school doors, Kelsey remained for a moment. He stared at the picture on his phone. They were there, not flawless, not unscarred, but whole, made whole by something newly forged. Life, he reflected, rarely moved in straight lines. It twisted, it faltered, it hurt. There were detours no one would choose, cliff edges no one could foresee. Loss could be so massive it threatened to consume you. And yet, even in the wreckage, unexpected beginnings could take root. New bonds could form, not to erase the old, but to grow beside them. His story with Hillary wasn't over. It never would be. She lived on in him, in Lucy, in every memory that still breathed inside their home. But today, a new chapter had begun. A chapter with different characters, new adventures, unexpected grace. Kelsey slipped the phone back into his coat pocket and began the walk home, the winter sunlight warming his face. There would be forms to fill out, hearings to attend, and hurdles he hadn't even imagined yet. But for the first time in a long time, he felt ready, hopeful. It wasn't the life he had planned, but it was real. It was happening now. And most importantly, it was theirs. A family not born of blood or obligation, but of choice of love and of a Christmas morning that changed everything. Thank you truly for staying with us until the very end of this story. If you're here listening to these final words, it means you've walked with this family through their hardest winters and their quietest joys. Perhaps in some way it reminded you of something you've lived through, or someone you still carry in your heart. Every moment shared, every small gesture of kindness, every brave choice made in silence. That's where love grows. That's where healing begins. We don't always choose how stories begin, but we can choose how they continue through compassion, courage, and connection. Wherever you're watching from in this big wide world, we're grateful you're part of this one small corner. If this story touched you, if it made you pause, reflect, or simply feel, let us know in the comments. Tell us where you're tuning in from. We'd love to hear. And if you'd like to walk with us again in the next story, don't forget to like and subscribe. It helps more than you know, and it keeps this little circle of empathy and storytelling alive. Until next time, stay kind, stay human, and remember, sometimes the smallest act of love can change the course of someone's life. We'll see you in the next chapter.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.